Welcome to Gotta Run with Will. I'm guest hosting. My name is Jessica Chichester, and I'm here with our very special guest, Deena Kastor, Olympic medalist and American record holder in the marathon. Also, New York Times bestselling author of Let Your Mind Run. Welcome, Deena.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
What inspired you to write this book, Let Your Mind Run?
Yeah, I resisted it so much because the people that were around me trying to influence me to write a memoir weren't doing a good job at it. I was saying like I don't care that people have a list of my personal bests and wins and losses, and it seemed a little self-aggrandizing and self-promoting to do that. But as soon as they came at it from the perspective of it being more of an instructional memoir on how you can use your thoughts and perspectives to shape your perspective, but also to really chase your goals and get the best out of yourself, to really reach your potential by your thinking. That really got to the core of what I have done my entire career. And it seemed like every story I shared with my co-author, that it just kept coming back to using your thoughts to be able to reach your greatest in any given moment. And if you do that time and time again, those little moments add up to a really big deal.
I think you achieved your objective because the book has motivated myself and many of my friends that have read it. And yeah, it's just been wonderful. I have to ask, so this book goes back like way to your high school days. How did you remember
Oh my
everything?
gosh, for years I have been begging my parents to get rid of those boxes in their garage filled with like every little time my name was mentioned in the paper, it was like ripped out and taped to this scrapbook. And I kept telling them like, get rid of it. We don't need to hold on to all this garbage. And as soon as I decided to write this book, I sprinted to their house and grabbed those boxes and laid everything out in our guest bedroom at home and put everything in chronological order so that as I was writing about certain moments of my life, I first reflected and wrote on my memory, and then I went and checked it against some of the facts that were printed in the paper, quotes and stories, and from magazines and newspapers. And so it was really a great asset to have that, the accountability of the media to print accurate information so I could correct my memory in some cases or support my the ideas that I had by the words that I used sometimes 20, 25 years ago.
Wow. I mean, did you have like journals and things too, or training logs that you referenced?
I
Like, do you save
did.
those things
My
from years
very
ago?
first diary was a Hello Kitty diary that had a lock, and I had to cut it open because I no longer had the key to it. But got information from that on some of my first days of running at 11 years old. And then I've always kept little travel journals when I've traveled around for running and racing. Not as much for pleasure. It seemed like my family always jumped in the car, or hopped on an airplane to go support my races. So feel really grateful that running gave us those family vacations.
Yeah, I noticed in all of your recounts of your races, your family was always there,
They are, and to this
which is
day, they're
amazing.
so supportive. I feel
Mhm.
so grateful for that. And my sister, who's 4 years younger than me, could have been jealous as all get out to be traveling to my races all the time. The talk at dinner parties when my parents were hosting was always about running and the next trip we were going on. And I think that she could have been resentful in a lot of those cases, but instead she became my biggest fan.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was wondering about that with your sister. She never wanted to join in the fun and start running.
She did at one moment when I had just graduated from high school and she was coming into high school, and she ran cross country season because a lot of her girlfriends were, but she quickly learned that it was not for her. She liked the social aspect of it, which I've always loved. I think it's hooked me on the sport, that social aspect of running on trails and giggling with your girlfriends, and even now the accountability having my Mammoth Track Club teammates to meet up with every single morning. Running's always been very social. To be here talking with you, to be running in Central Park this morning with Mary Wittenberg, the previous race director of the New York City Marathon, and the board of directors of the New York Roadrunners this morning. It's always social, and I love that. The chit chat and the reflection that goes on with like-minded people as the miles tick on.
I think a lot of runners and readers of your book definitely relate to early times in running, and it made me feel very nostalgic reading about your early days. So how long did it take you to write your book from start to finish?
Oh my gosh. So my co-author, Michelle Hamilton, who I chose to co-author with me because I loved her writing. It was so reflective. She just had a recent piece in Runner's World where she went to Saudi Arabia to interview women in running over there and to see how that movement is becoming very big. And I just love how tenderly and compassionately she writes. And she's always written that way. So she writes with a deep understanding. And so I wanted that out of the book, and she did a beautiful job helping shape that story in a way that is relatable to other runners. So she left her job at Runner's World 4 years ago to take on this project with me. She thought she was going to be working on it for a year turned into 3, but I think we're both very proud of what came of it, because we're both kind of perfectionists and know this was both of our first books. So we wanted it to be good and wanted it to be reminiscent of who we are and what we wanted to get out of it. So I feel like we nailed all the targets that we aimed to get out of the book. But I think running, part of the reason why this book was successful was because everybody wants motivation. I look for motivation throughout the day, every day of my entire life, to help to grab inspiration off the streets, a billboard, a book that I'm reading, a song lyric, listening to people's stories. And I love to gain that inspiration and apply it to my life. But in running, there is no other sport in the world that we can relate across the board to everybody, from the people at the front of the pack of a major marathon to the people that are first timers just trying to get to that finish line. We all go through those ebbs and flows, the roller coaster of the marathon, both in training and in the race itself. And I think that I could be on a basketball court with Kobe Bryant, or on the football field with John Elway, or some of our great quarterbacks, and never really know what it's like to be them, even if I practice with them all day long. And running is a different story. And the marathon itself, we're a community, and I really love that aspect of it.
I know you talk a lot about books you read that motivated you and things like that. Do you have like a pump-up song?
Oh man. I tend to listen, because I have a 7-year-old daughter. I tend to listen to like the latest and greatest hits. So whatever's on Kids Bop radio, and I feel like a lot of those beats get me excited. Madonna has always gotten me pumped up and excited. I tend to be pretty mellow competitively. And so a good song before I get out and compete always seems to rev my engines and heighten my senses a little bit. And so that's kind of where I bring in music is right before a competition, to help kind of elevate me a little bit and get me ready to charge off that line.
So do you have like a full pre-race ritual that you follow every time?
2015, many years into my career, when my husband, I went to bring my shoes down to get checked. The athletes have to make sure that their logos are follow a specific measurement standard, so we're not over advertising. And so I brought ASICS has been my sponsor for 18 years. And so I brought my racing shoes down to get checked, and I noticed that they were untied. And I had this little panic attack, like, oh my God, my shoes are untied. And Andrew's like, yeah, I untied them for you back in the room so that when you go to put them on race day, you don't have to untie them to get your foot in. And I'm like, yeah, but don't you know, every race that I go to, I keep them tied because I lock that last workout into the laces so that when I untie them before the race, this big ceremonial moment, I reflect on all the hard workouts that were in those shoes. And he was like, but you could still do that with the shoes untied. And I was like, you're right. I shouldn't be so fixated on this. So he was like, do you want me to retie your shoes? And I was like, no, I'm going to see how this works out. I'm going to just think about it while I lace my shoes up at the race morning. And the race unfolded beautifully.
That was Chicago Marathon,
Yes,
2015.
yes,
So you
yes.
got the
Masters American record that day.
So I think that was a good thing.
Yeah, to be challenged, to say like things can go right even though
Yeah.
you're not wearing your favorite underwear or your little charm, your good luck charm tied onto your shoes. It can still work out. Yeah. But I needed to recognize that first, that okay, this is a little ludicrous.
Yeah. I want to get into like your college career. This is when you first kind of started getting injured and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, so how did you deal with that? You weren't able to train.
Yeah, it's a great question, because when I was in an injury cycle of coming back anxious, trying to make up time and make up miles that I had missed while being injured, I was running anxiously and uptight and fell into injury again. So it wasn't until after college where I was running more miles, but happy and feeling in control of my training and the direction that I wanted to go in professionally, that I could see what was going on in college. When you run with tension and stress, your muscles and your tendons are stressed and tense, and so to run with joy and gratitude, which this book is seeped in, how I was able to implement these things into my training, these acts of positivity, thought and optimism, that I was able to really get the best out of myself. I was loose and fluid and almost running a little lighter on my feet, even though I was heavier. Like it's fascinating to me how our thoughts manifest themselves physically, and the juxtaposition between college and when I first started my professional career is definitely a testament to that.
So when you first started your professional career, that's when you kind of started realizing the power of positive thinking.
Yes.
I was very impressed when you were all bent out of shape about, not being able to run, but you were still inspired enough to get up at 4 a.m. to bake.
Right.
Like, where do you get that kind of motivation from to just pursue another passion like that right off the bat?
Right. I think that's what running has taught me, to just pursue a passion. And and so even when I broke my foot in the Beijing Olympics in 2008, running taught me to be goal oriented. So my goal, even though I was in crutches and had a cast on my leg, that my goal was to become healthy, because I wasn't at the time. I has onset of osteoporosis at a very young age, and that to me was like a non-negotiable. Like, I'm supposed to be the epitome of health, not the opposite. So I was really driven and disciplined to just get my skeleton strong and healthy, and everything I did through the day had that focus in mind, including doing things that were joyful, sitting on the deck and treating myself well by having a delicious sandwich with a good view, and convincing my mom I was actually okay. And she didn't believe me for a really long time, until she could see that, wow, Deena's actually healing quickly, and the sound of her voice is great. Her and my dad came to check on me even, and got to see that I was in fact okay without running, because running had taught me to focus on an endpoint and chase it, and I was able to do that.
Did you ever have this fear? I'm asking kind of personally.
Sure, of course.
Like, when you're injured, do you ever have that fear, like when you come back, you're just not going to be able to get faster?
Absolutely.
Or like, even worse, you're not even going to be able to get to be as fast as you were?
Absolutely. And I think that's normal for anybody to feel that way. And so I also think it's important that we give ourselves permission to feel that fear or anxiety, and identify it. But in identifying it, you're like, okay, so I care an awful lot about continuing in this sport because of what it gives us emotionally, physically, mentally, a lot of us spiritually. And so it's important to just say that's okay to feel that fear, but then also to counter to that is to not always judge ourselves by who we were yesterday or a week ago, but by who we are in that day, and to do that in the best light. I always try to bring it back to my character in that moment, that how do I want to define myself, even though, we're in a low place right now, probably couldn't get much lower than this. And how could I climb out of this so that I'm like a rung higher tomorrow or next week? And measure yourself in that regard, as opposed to, because I know I'm not going to run 2:19 ever again. And Actually, just when those words came out of my mouth, I was picturing my husband say, like, not with that attitude, you're not. But in all honesty, I don't believe I'm going to run 2:19 ever again. But I love chasing the marathon because in any given buildup, it's getting the best out of me. And I know I'm the best version of myself physically and mentally by pursuing it time and again, every spring, every fall. I had to drop out of the Boston Marathon this year with hypothermia at mile 14. I was more sore than any marathon I had ever run after that 14 miles. And it took me a long time to recover from it because I had pushed myself so much in that race, even though I didn't get very far. And I just had to say, you know what, I had an amazing buildup. I actually thought I was a dark horse in that race, that I could be up there competing with the leaders, and because my training had gone so well. But race day had another story for me. And I know that with that buildup, I was at my best, and that race, it was the best I could do on that given day. And I needed to accept that and know that that's still a part of me, that buildup is still a part of me, and I can bring it into the next buildup. It's not like starting over every time.
And you came back after that and ran an amazing Brooklyn half marathon.
Yeah, in the rain.
Yeah.
I felt like there was this
Similar
cloud
conditions.
just following me to every race I was going to go to this year. It was fun. I'd always wanted to do that race. And for the New York City Marathon, and when I come for some of the New York Roadrunners events, I always feel like I'm staying in Midtown Manhattan. And this was the first time I actually stayed in Brooklyn and really got to experience Brooklyn. And it was a different vibe of New York than I've ever experienced. So it was really fun to be there for that.
When you first started professional running, did anybody try to talk you out of it?
I think the only person that tried to talk me out of it was my dad. My mom wanted me to move home, as all moms do. Like, come home, I'll make you soup. But my dad was just like, well, you can't really make a living doing that. And he's a business guy, and so his mind is always on the bottom line, especially when he's the one writing me checks all the time. And I remember that there was one time in college that I bounced a check, and he was like, just because you have checks in your checkbook doesn't mean we just constantly feed money into your account. And I was like, okay, I got it. And so when I got to Alamosa, I really wanted to show them that I could do that, prove it to me that my best is either good enough or not, but it was worth trying, and show them that I can be independent. So I got a job working as a waitress in a cafe, and we had a chance to just go back there this summer, take Piper to Alamosa to show her where the lawn of the Catholic Church where mom and dad first kissed, and the restaurants we both worked at. And so it was really fun to take her back and be nostalgic there, and know that was the foundation of really my work ethic, being able to be under the tutelage of Coach Vigil, and him instilling in me the drive and the work ethic and the independence to think for myself and think myself stronger. While he had the physical program to follow, my job was to come up with a good attitude and show up and give my best every day.
You mentioned Coach Vigil. Would you consider him one of your most influential people?
Hands down, the most influential person. But I think that anyone who's had the privilege to work with him would say that. So I'm not alone in the blessings that he's passed on. He's just generous like that. I actually dedicated the book to him because he taught me by example, not telling me, but by example, showing me that the value of all that we have, be it time, knowledge, money, food on the table, that it increases in value the moment it's shared with someone who's always willing to share time, although he didn't have a lot of it. He was always willing to share. I'm talking about him in the past tense. He's still alive. So he's actually turning 89 this month, which is just insane, and still travels the world and gives clinics, and really just has such a passion for this sport. And it is so evident every day that you talk to him.
Wow. So what about the men that you were training with out there? Like, was that intimidating going out there and being the only woman?
It was intimidating, but I think that little bit of nervousness showing up every day, trying to hold my own with them, was a really important factor in becoming strong and building so much in that first year. I grew so exponentially, physically, mentally, and I owe it all to that type of intimidation, wanting to please Coach Vigil, wanting to hold my own with my male teammates, and also knowing that I was giving it one last shot, and so I wanted to do everything right. And I'll say that I love that Coach Vigil instilled in me a belief that it was all possible. And I think that whenever we're trying to go after something bigger than ourselves and chase these pipe dreams, these wild dreams that we might have, believing that you're capable is that first step in succeeding. So I'm going to wake up with the goal of chasing every day that I get out there and get in my long runs and my speed sessions and my hills. And the answer was yes, I still believe I can do it.
So Tokyo will be the only major you haven't run, correct?
Yeah, I've run the Berlin half, so I haven't done the Berlin full marathon. So that might be next. There's always something, right? There's always something that just keeps us in this sport for at least one more race. And that's really been my hook, especially in the marathon, on the track and in cross country that I was raised doing. I was really felt like it was a performance, performing for my parents, performing for the coaches, performing for the spectators in those huge European track meets. And it felt like a performance every time I was out there. And it wasn't until stepping foot in New York City in 2001 to run this marathon right after the attacks of September 11th that I really felt a part of a much bigger community. And that's really what hooked me on this distance.
So what is your favorite marathon, would you say?
You remember your first, so that I feel like that I throw that out there, and we're also in New York City recording this, so that gives me a little leverage to say New York City as well. But I think every time I'm asked that, something different pops into my mind because it felt significant in a moment. And so they've all been significant in different ways, from London being a personal best and that amazing course, historic course that follows the River Thames and gets drawn up to Big Ben and the Parliament building and finishes in the mall right in front of Buckingham Palace. It's like, feels so royal. You can't help but feel royal when you're racing there. The Boston Marathon with its history and the desire for people to continue that legacy of such a significant race in our country. The Chicago Marathon was my first marathon win, so that feels really special. I show up there every year. So a lot of these races I go to, whether I'm running, working television, being there for my sponsor or ASIC sponsor, they've all been special in really big ways.
So New York City Marathon is this weekend. Do you have any bets on who's going to take it for the women?
Yeah, that's like such a buzz right now because the American women's field is so large, but they also have a great contingency of past champions and national record holders from around the world. So it's going to be a race to watch. Undoubtedly, it's going to be a wonderful race to watch unfold. And I think it's so fun to hear all the predictions that happen throughout the week as we get closer to race day. But with the dynamic that happens in front of the television is one of my favorite things to watch, because even though the men and the women are running in same exact conditions, the races unfold sometimes significantly different, where the men are chasing fast times and trying to drop each other from the start, and the women's race is a little more tactical. And so I think it's really fun to watch those characters play out and how people define themselves and their strategies that they come into. I think in the beginning, in the women's races in particular, there's a lot of like looking around and trying to decipher people's body language. They're just reading each other. And that to me is really fun to witness.
Yeah. I'm wondering a little bit about your marathon strategy, like morning fueling, race fueling, things like that us recreational runners want to know about.
Yeah, and fuel is part of the game. It's like the most significant part of the marathon game because our bodies don't have enough stores to go 26.2 miles. So we kind of have to manipulate it by getting in fluids and calories along the way. I've always used a carbohydrate drink every 5K, 6 to 8 ounces, which is quite a significant amount. And if I'm erring on 6 ounces, I try to practice strengthening the ratios so there's more carbohydrates in those ounces. And then at 25K and 35K, I changed to 2 jet blackberry goos in a little bit of water, so it's kind of dissolved, so the consistency is a little easier to get down. And so that's been kind of my fueling routine for the entire time I've done the marathon. And it seems to work for me. If I miss a bottle, I make sure I get calories by whatever the brand is that they're providing on the course, because it's just that important to get the calories in and get them in early from the first 5K.
So what do you eat race morning?
Race morning is really just topping off your carbohydrate stores, so you don't have to eat a significant amount of food, but I like to eat a well-toasted bagel with a great deal of butter on it, and a cup of coffee. Sometimes, if it's available, I'll have some scrambled eggs too. For some reason, I always feel like a balance of protein and carbohydrates is good for me, and I feel the protein is good for muscle building and brain function, and which seems to go towards the end of a marathon. So if I eat protein ahead of time, maybe a placebo effect, I feel like I'm going to be mentally sharp by the end of the race.
Do you follow a strict carb loading plan like the week up?
I am not part of that family that's just protein and protein driven. I think our bodies operate best off of carbohydrates for a steady fuel source. So I just make sure that I've got carbohydrates and proteins. I love pizza and fresh breads, salmon, but everything, all the meat sources, I like to be sustainable, grass-fed, wild-caught, and free range, whatever the protein source is. I want to make sure that it's a high quality protein, and then making sure I get in an array of vegetables and fruits to make sure I'm getting the minerals that I need. I don't believe in supplementation. I think our bodies are very well capable of going the distance off of food, and especially if you're making good food decisions, that you can do that on your own without getting any deficiencies. When I had my vitamin D deficiency, which was responsible for my foot break in 2008, it was a vitamin D deficiency from not getting enough sun, because I've had a lot of skin cancer issues. And so making sure that I eat a lot of foods with vitamin D in it, herring and wild-caught salmon and leafy greens from organic sources, because there's more bioavailability. So just making those good decisions so that I'm getting the energy and nutrients that I need to be able to not just be fit, but healthy.
And your training leading up to marathon, is it the same now as it was like when you were in 2 hour, 19 minute?
It's similar in a sense of the quality, but I've definitely cut back on my miles so that I have the energy to be a mom and a mentor to my teammates, and to be able to go and volunteer in my daughter's classroom, and to take my 2 large mastiffs for walks every day. So because my roles are more now, I feel like running has cut back a little in mileage, not in quality. And so I think my buzzword is quality. I want to eat quality foods, spend time with quality people, get in quality running. And that to me is been a pretty fulfilling strategy.
What is your favorite quality workout?
My favorite quality workout would probably be uphill tempo runs. So just getting to that red line and grinding through it. I might taste blood as I'm climbing that mountain, but I feel like it makes my my mechanics really strong and efficient, as well as building strength for racing.
Do you have any plans to write another book?
I don't have plans to write another book as of now, but there will be a workbook version for people to be able to use the strategies that I use in the book, that they can also use them and apply them to their lives.
I could ask you a million more questions, but we're running out of time. So this was a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Manhattan Neighborhood Network and Will Sanchez for hosting us today.
Thank you. It was
Thanks,
fun.
Deena. No, really, it was lovely chatting with you. I really wish I could talk to you more.
I know, and I wish you were running.
Hi, I'm Piper Castor, and I'm going to be a horseback rider when I grow up. And I am also going to be a runner. Gotta run.